Deciding which Monado art to use when is very important when playing Shulk, as making the right decision compared to the wrong one could save your entire party from losing. As an example, if the enemy has quite a vicious spike on them but has no topple spike, then using Monado Cyclone over Monado Purge could be ideal, as it prevents you from taking any damage from the spike or the enemy themselves and provides an opportunity for a combo. The same can also be applied for defensive Monado arts, such as armor and speed. Monado speed in most cases will help you avoid a physical attack. However, if that physical attack is AoE, then only one party member is safe. So Monado armor in that circumstance would be the better art to go for. So double check and make sure that you can kill the enemy with a Monado buster, and that playing the safe route going for Monado shield isn't the right choice. Consider when playing through the game what role you want Reyn to serve as he's excellent as both an offensive and defensive character, and depending how you build him, he can do excellent in both of those roles. So consider the arts, gems and what build you're running when you want Reyn to work a certain way. You won't really need to consider aggro, however, as Reyn in both his offensive and defensive variants have many ways of acquiring and gaining more aggro. So the question is, do you want Reyn to be dealing lots of damage, or for him to be surviving lots of damage all at once? Personally, I prefer the offensive Reyn. So by far, the biggest tip that I can give you for Sharla is heatsink gems. Use heatsink gems. The more arts you can unload before having to cool off makes a huge difference in Sharla's effectiveness. It helps you not have to worry about Sharla cooling off during chain attacks. It helps to make sure that you've got healing and support arts at the ready when they need to go, and it also drastically increases the damage output. Use heatsink gems. So there is a strategy for Dunban known as the Naked Dunban strat, which consists of running Dunban with no gear and no gems, and taking advantage of the skills you see on screen. Now, this strategy can actually be very useful. On screen now, you'll see my Dunban fully kitted out with all of his skill links, and Dunban as he'd be run in the Naked Dunban strat, and he actually has more stats. Now, this is a decision that you'd have to make as you're compromising all of your defense. So for actually playing through the main game, this strategy will probably work, having tons of extra agility. But against Avalanche Abyssy, I'm not quite sure how effective it really will be. So I've talked about Melia's elemental burst being granted every time you can get a vision in the first episode of this series. But what I didn't mention then was that elemental burst actually lasts longer depending on what Melia's tension is. As the higher Melia's tension, the less likely it is that elemental burst will disappear. And that's why it's an extremely good idea to tie Seven's explosion of energy skill to Melia as well, so that whenever she uses elemental discharge, Melia's tension will raise up by 1 level, practically meaning that Melia will always be at max tension, and if she ever loses max tension, we'll get there in a matter of seconds. So one of my favourite arts to use on Riki is Say Sorry, as Riki lacks options for dealing high burst damage, and this is excellent for doing so, especially when considering the amount of debuffs Riki himself can apply onto the enemy. However, there's a big but. Riki's Say Sorry can also remove topple and daze, which means if you're trying to use a topple lock strategy, then Say Sorry probably isn't the best choice to use unless you're operating him. However, full warning, if he's on the AI, they will use Say Sorry multiple times when you have a very difficult boss, toppled and dazed. So be warned. So Fiora has 5 different options for drones, and I'm going to go through which ones you should use and when. We'll start off with sword drones, which is your 10 hit combo, which is excellent for single target damage. If you want to nuke only one enemy, sword drones is definitely the way to go. If there's multiple enemies but you still want the same damage output, then cannon drones will be more ideal. Cannon drones 2 has the same art power as sword drones 10, and will hit all enemies that are directly in front of Fiora. But what if all the enemies are around you? 2, we'll sacrifice a bit of power and go for gun drones, which allows you to do 6 hits of damage all around Fiora for massive AoE damage. And then finally, the last 2, shield drones 1 and 2. Surprisingly, these both have different effects. Shield drones 1 acts as a Monado shield for only Fiora, so if you've built Fiora as a tank, you might want to do this route. However, shield drones 2 only gives Fiora debuff immunity for 30 seconds, which behind cool off is probably the worst talent art in the game.